This is Sam Katz with Gallery Glass, and I'm in the Lower East Side at the Blackston Gallery to speak with artist Rachel Beach.
Hi, Rachel. I see you peering behind the sculpture.
So we're at the Blackston Gallery in the Lower East Side for your latest exhibition, Long Standing. Can you tell me about the exhibition?
Sure. These pieces, let's see, where do I want to start? A big part of these are balancing strength and vulnerability, I think might be a simple way to put it, but they are, one of these objects to be very sturdy, very grounded, very solid, and a little bit even stoic might be a word, and then have them also have these very fragile points that push the limits of the balance of the piece or push the limits of the capabilities of the material itself, and then have the negative space eating into the object or being, those voids being equally as important as the solidity of the object. So that's a big part of these guys.
So you would say that in this particular body of work, those geometric voids, that negative space, is equally as important as the concreteness or the solidity of the actual work?
Absolutely.
Is that a common theme that you carry through, not only this series, but all of your work?
Yeah, it's there all the time. It has a little bit, I think it comes a little bit out of my background as a painter and that sort of figure ground and image object and sort of blurring those two things. So for me, that's like a third element, how that negative space becomes at times part of the image, at times part of the physicality of the object. Those negative spaces feel very, very weighty to me in a way. They're very muscular negative spaces and that.
Would you say some of your previous work was a little bit more airy or focused on a different central theme?
Well, they do different things. Sometimes they'll be a little bit more about line or, tracing a line through the air, having something very, very weighted, also feel very light. I mean, that's still part of these. The last body of work was a little bit more architectural, archaeological. I mean, the archaeological themes are still here as well.
So is that a big inspiration for you?
Yeah, yes, it is. I like thinking about how things happen through history and over time, how meanings change. I like that there's only part of the information in archaeological finds, objects, buildings, etc. So there's part of the information, and then part of it's unknown. I like this idea of specific but unknown. So you can see this very clear function, or sort of there's a very logical thing being presented, but there's something sort of mysterious and unknown. We can't quite.
I love that. I think that's what's really powerful about your work. What's the architectural relevance in this body?
Well, these ones I find myself, I think a lot about the haptic sense, which is this other sense where it's like you sort of feel, without touching something, it's something's relationship to your body, and it's based on memory and experience and what we know about space and objects. So I feel like that architecturally is a huge part of it. Spatially, the way that they frame a space, how you see something through something else, or when you enter a space, just that experience of moving through space.
Well, what's really interesting is you exhibit the work at a human scale. So I feel like the visitor or the viewer can relate to it in that way.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say about this body of work more than previous work, is that it's starting to feel very figurative to me. And I think that just comes straight out of architecture, like out of body relationship to space. And then all of a sudden
Absolutely.
they start to become more figurative.
Is there a particular meaning that you would like people to take away from the color choices that you've made for these pieces specifically?
Well, I think now this body of work is a little bit, I feel a little bit out on a limb with the palette. I've been working for the past, say, 5 years with a very limited palette range of yellow and black and white, a little bit of green, but really yellow-centric. And so I'm kind of healing out on a limb, but what I wanted as I was making these color choices is for those colors and those different surfaces, the images to affect the form. So in some cases, I want to accentuate that very weightedness, so the color will steer towards that, or they'll make something feel lighter than it is, or make something feel softer and open.
Sure.
And the geometries are experienced differently. So those color choices always relate to sort of that interaction with the form.
Can you tell me a little bit about your the evolution of how you came to make this sort of work?
Well, I started this body of work quite soon after my studio was destroyed in Sandy. So I lost all my work, my wood shop, all that. These pieces specifically are made up of the shapes that were left over at the end of building my other body work. So it's not literally the pieces, but these sorts of shapes. I was making little collages with these. There's triangular shape, like the 45s and the little rhombus shape. They're always sitting in piles in my studio, as well as the pieces in the back with that curve. That's the shape that when you take a jigsaw into a piece of wood to cut out that interior shape, you always have this rectangular shape with this curve.
Really interesting, yeah.
So for me, it was a little bit like almost like picking up the pieces or rebuilding. In some ways, it was just those are the pieces that
And that's not your typical process. That was only your process for this series.
I think the work always eats itself and generates itself, whether literally like this or, all artists will tell you that. We'll see that as the process of the work eating itself. But this one it wasn't a conscious choice, but those were the shapes I was interested in. I think they were just in my brain because those were the pieces that were sort of the leftover pieces,
Without giving too much away, can you tell me what you think is next for you? Feel free to just tease a little bit.
Well, what can I say? I'm really excited about, these points of fine balance for sure. I feel really interested in the works in the back, that the two-ness of them, that pairing, that sort of one and one, that it has that relationship, that idea of contingency, has that simplicity. Interested in that. And I have some bodies of work using screen prints and little sculptural objects on the prints, and so I'm always interested in that sort of cross-contamination between the image and this object, and so I'm continuing that work.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you so much for speaking with me. This is Sam Katz of Gallery Glass. Now give us a kiss.